Hello, this is Mary Middlestedt with Design and Be Merry, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the difference between wool felt and felted woven wool. This has always been a question I see crop up on the sites, especially started with people who are new to stitching with wool, or who have not sewn with wool before at all, and they're very confused. Lots of different information out here, so hopefully this short video will give you some explanation and a start, and you can certainly go from there. A lot of people have prejudice towards one or the other. Basically, my philosophy is learn all about what the material does, and then you can use it in any way you can. Okay, as far as wool felt. Wool felt is different. We're not talking the 100% acrylic wool that you used to buy at the Ben Franklin. That was my idea initially. You can work with it, but it has none of the qualities that wool has to offer. And so I do not recommend that in order to have a good experience. I have worked with it once. I have a friend who's totally allergic to wool. I wanted to make her something, and I used it. Wool felt has some wonderful colors. They are different than woven wools. What wool felt is basically, it is fibers, not unlike this, of wool roving straight from a sheep that have been heated and pressed and compressed into a sheet. And you can get, I work a lot with National Nonwovens, you can get wool felts that have rayon in them, and these are all blends. You can get 100% wool felt. Some people make their own wool felt by literally wet flashing. They literally agitate and put it with hot water and soak it, and by rubbing it and working it, you can actually get a nice thick warm layer of wool. And this would have been commonly how many people did it hundreds of years ago in order to have warm fibers to line their boots and shoes and moccasins in the wintertime, whatever, for native peoples, if they had that opportunity. In this case, they're machine done, and like I said, you can get, there's some beautiful wools out there that are 100% wool, and otherwise you can get them in blends. They all work. One thing about the blends, I have found, even though the instructions will say do not wash, I find that I wash them on a gentle cycle in hot water, and they generally will come out just fine, and then I kind of repress them, and they have an entirely different hand to them. And I just want to show you, one of the neat thing is that when you wash them, if you can see this here, you'll get this nubby type texture, and it does shrink. And then I press it, and you can get it back to the nice smooth texture. But some people really like doing this, and they get it for beards and animals and rough textures that they enjoy very much. Also, something that wool felt has to offer is that you can usually get a pure white. Everybody knows, or most everybody who knows anything about wool realizes that you really can't get a perfect white wool that's 100% wool. Bleach doesn't work on wool. It tends to disintegrate it. And so there are some wools that come very close, but if you want a true white, you would probably go with a wool felt. And you can mix it. The one thing you have to remember about wool felt is if you're only going to wash the item once in a great while, maybe it's a wall hanging or something you keep on a side table and something finally dribbles on it and you would soak it, that's going to work out fine. If this is something you're going to wash repeatedly, then over time it probably will not hold up because there is no woven structure to this wool felt. There's absolutely no woven structure. It's just simply pieces of fuzz that have been held together through heat and abrasion and agitation, and then pressed. And like I said, the colors you can get are very different than many of the wools. They just have a different effect. And however, they are making some of the wool felts with some of the more natural looking type things. The other thing that you can do with both wool and wool felt is you can use some of this, and you can kind of play with your own by taking a small amount of wool felt, and you can get these little needles, these tools. They're felting needles, and by punching repeatedly, you basically can adhere and make your piece. That's how they're making, if you see these felted animals. And if I lift this up, this is, you have to work on something that you can punch these needles into. They're sharp. You'll see that on the back, I don't know if you can see. You can see it. It's like, it looks like hair growing or grass growing through it. But basically, it adheres that wool, and it's not easy to pull out. And you can shape this, and you can get little details. So that may be something that you can use with wool felt or with wool. I did a lot of it with when I was felting wool yarn, knitting, and felting it, and then I would accent things. And you can get circles, you can get shapes, all kinds of fun things. So that might be something you want to try. You can get this little thing at a big box store if you want. Anyways, so that's your wool felt, or I call it wool felt. It's probably wool blend, but there are wool felts. You have to seek around and just find out from the people that you're buying it from, you know, whether it's been washed, if they're making it, if they're in a small business where they're making their own 100% wool felt, you'll pay more for the sheet, but you'll be able to, you can ask them right away, and they've obviously had it in hot water. You probably won't have to rewash. One of the things I forgot to mention, one thing that's nice about wool felt, especially for beginners, is that you never have any fraying on the edge. You get nice, clean edges. So it's great. Generally speaking, wool felt is also, or wool felt blends are less expensive, and you can buy yardage. They're not as commonly found. You may have to go online. There are some quilt shops that can't handle it, but you can get it in yardage, so it's great. It makes a great backing on many of your wool projects. That's less expensive, and yet it's nice and soft. I find I use it for mug rugs, and you can mix it in with wool felt. Again, know and understand what it does, that this is not a product that is made for continual washing. It will eventually degrade because it's just loosely woven fibers. Okay, when we talk about wool, woven wool, there's so many different kinds of woven wool, but basically what you're talking about, and I'm going to get a needle here, is you're talking about a wool fabric that has a selvage. I just got this piece from Pendleton. They have a sale in March, and I always indulge my love of Pendleton wool. And this happened to be a piece that they had. Selvage is regular woven. This is a fabric that, if you look at it, and this piece may show it better, if I can get close, you can see that there are threads running both ways. It's been woven on a machine, and you can see, let's see if I can pull some out. This happens to be a hand dye that I got from a local quilt shop, and you can see that I can pull actual strings out of it, and you'll notice that there are threads that are going both ways. And you can actually see that in this one. It's a thinner piece of wool, and if you look on the back, you can also see that it's woven. You can see the structure of threads. This will not come apart. If it's been hand dyed, chances are it's been in water and it's been washed and dried and shrunk. You can usually use that directly right away. If you're buying wool on a bolt, it's highly likely it has not been washed and would likely need to be washed, so you have to take into consideration that there may be some shrinkage, because by washing it in hot water and agitating it, it causes the fibers to tighten up and to mat and become heavy. This is some Melton wool. This is a very thick wool. It makes a great backing. And this stuff, I have bought it at Pendleton. And a lot of reenacting places will use this because it's an excellent wool for like outdoor well. And I really had to work to get this piece to come out. But you can see again that it's a woven fabric. And you can cut circles. And once it's been washed, which I usually wash, I tend to wash them on a mild, a lighter wash, because I happen to know that Pendleton wools are almost like matted to begin with. They're so tightly woven that it's almost not an issue. But I do rewash them again for further making the edges. And this is an example of a circle I cut out, and you can see that there are absolutely no edges that are going to come loose on here. So obviously it's nice to get good wool. If you get inexpensive wool, you need to develop a critical eye. Some wools are very loosely woven, and they will be much more difficult to deal with. I've had some loosely woven wool and that I got from a local store, and it was not a quilt shop, and I could never get it to felt up enough, and it continued to fray. Did not care for it. Here's some, this is a shirting wool, again, very thin wool. that I got from Pendleton. And if you look very closely, hopefully you can see, if I can get this up close, you can see that there's some fraying here because I purposely pulled out some threads. And you can see it's hard to pull them out. So for those of you that like that, but hopefully this, and this again is, this is a shirting weight, which is totally, this is like a third of the weight of this blue Melton. Both have been felted. I put all my wool into, I buy these on the bolt, and I put them into my washing machine. And like I said, I tend to, for the Pendleton wools at least, tend to use a gentle cycle, but you want something that'll agitate in your washing machine. And some people do this by hand. They're able to do it by hand with smaller pieces. And that agitation in the hot water and then stopping that action and letting it dry, you'll get a nice matted piece. And you won't have to worry about it hopefully bleeding either. This is a piece of coat weight Pendleton wool. And this piece is really interesting. I got this and I have never had to wash it. It's got such a tight edge, it just doesn't fray out. And go figure. But it's been nice to have. It's 100% wool. And like I said, this is the piece I just got. I put it in the washing machine yesterday. You can see how some of the edges along the cut edge. And again, it has a selvage edge. So if you're buying on the bolt, you'll find the selvage edge. Usually you won't find that so much. You may find it now and then on like a fat quarter of wool that's been hand dyed. And again, hand dyed wool will have usually been in a dye bath, so it's been in hot water and has had some agitation. So it's usually ready to use. Hopefully this information has been helpful to you. And hopefully it'll clarify what you are buying. Never hesitate to ask questions. I see people who occasionally will buy something and they'll say, oh, I got it and it frayed out, or I didn't have enough yardage once I shrunk it. So you need to know those things when you're buying your wool. Obviously small pieces. Some people reclaim wool from used clothing, and that's fine. Just be sure it has usually 20%. No more than 20% acrylic. You're certainly welcome to try anything beyond that, and you can use that for, if it has less than 20% acrylic in it, usually that will also work and felt quite fine. Some people call the term fulling, by the way, so don't let the terminology scare you. Last but not least, I had to pause there. Remember that natural wools will have different colors. You're not going to get your real vivid colors. And again, there are no pure whites. This is one of the whiter ones that I have. Remember that white can be achieved by contrast. By placing a light color next to a darker color, you can get it to appear lighter when you do that. And wools in general will be more expensive. There's no doubt about it that it is a more expensive proposition. And the other thing you need to know about wools is it is very important not to use worsted wools. Worsted wools are made with thread that are not meant to felt. They will not felt, and you'll always have fraying. They were meant for clothing usage. And I got some once by mistake sent to me. I didn't see it. They told me it was a different type of wool, and when I got it, I realized it was worsted. And I have used that for backings on my wool by carefully using fusible around the edges. I have been able to use some of it for that. It's beautiful wool, but it's not intended for this purpose, and you really can't make it felt. So worsted wool, if you find the most beautiful piece and you're trying to recycle, that would be something you wouldn't want to probably invest in unless you want to use it as backing with fusible. Otherwise, like I said, hopefully this has clarified some of the differences and will help those of you who are looking for wool and want to spend your pennies wisely and know what you're buying. Hope this information has been helpful to you. If you've enjoyed it, please view some of my other videos. You can subscribe to my channel. You can also visit my website, www.designandbemerry.com. I have tutorials. I design patterns, and have a blog, which I do occasionally. And I would be more than happy to have you follow along. Have a great day today, and enjoy your stitching.